Vishnupad Padamamsa Parajikacharya Ashtra Tarsata Shishimari. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Vishnupad Padamamsa Parajikacharya Ashtra Tarsata Shishimari. Shri Guru Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Anantikoti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Pramsikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaur Bhaktavinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Shama Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. New Dwarka Dham Ki Jai. Their Divine Lordship Shri Shri Rukmini Dwarkadish Ki Jai. Their Divine Lordship Shri Shri Jagannath Baldev Srimati Subhadra Ki Jai. Their Divine Lordship Shri Shri Gornitai Ki Jai. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai. Harinam Sankirtan Yoga Ki Jai. Transcendental Prasadam Distribution Ki Jai. Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the Sama devotees Hare Krishna. All glories to the Sama devotees Hare Krishna. All glories to the Sama devotees Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Hare Krishna Jai Buddha Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is the second canto, chapter 10. We are on text number 20. And today's topic will be Jigrikshataha. This is Krishna's desire to smell odors. So we're talking about Krishna's desires and what we're doing through Krishna's desires. So today's verse. Nasike nirabhidyetam. Nasike nirabhidyetam. Dodhuyate nabhasvati. Dodhuyati nabhasvati. Tatra Vayur Gandha Vaho. Tatra Vayur Gandha Vaho. Grano Nasi Jigrikshataha. Grano Nasi Jigrikshataha. Nasike nirabhidyetam. Dodhuyate nabhasvati. Tatra vayur gandhavaho. Grano nasi jigrikshakta. Nasike nirabhidyetam. Dodhuyate nabhasvati. Tatra vayur gandhavaho. Grano nasi jigrikshataha. Please chant. Nasike nirabhidyetam. Dodhuyati nabhasvati. Tatra vayur gandhavaho. Grano nasi jigrikshataha. Nasike nirabhidyetam. Baho Nasi Vikshitaha Siketi Namidetam Nyati Nabashati Vaishnavis Nakshite Nirbeditam Naboyasati Tatrasi Tatravaya Gandavaho Granunasika Grikshitaha Site Nirbeditam Doruyati Nabashati Tatravaya Gandavaho Granunasita Grikshitaha Naksikte Nirbeditam Dodhuyati Nabasvati Tatravaya Gandavaho Granunasita Griksataha. Nasike, in the nostrils. Nirbeditam, being developed. Dodhuyati, rapidly blowing. Nabhasvati, air respiration. Tatra, thereupon. Vayu, air. Gandhavaha, smelling odor. Granaha, sense of smell. Nasi, in the nose. Jigrikshataha, desiring to smell odors. Translation. Thereafter, when the Supreme Purusha desired to smell odors, the nostrils and respiration were generated. The nasal instrument and odors came into existence, and the controlling deity of air, carrying smell, also became manifested. Please repeat. Thereafter, when the Supreme Purusha desired to smell odors, the nostrils and respiration were generated. The nasal instrument and odors came into existence, and the controlling deity of air, carrying smell, also became manifested. Purport. The nasal instrument, odor, and the controlling deity of air, smelling, etc., all became manifested simultaneously when the Lord desired to smell. The Vedic mantras confirm this statement in the Upanishad's statement that everything is first desired by the Supreme before the subordinate living entity can act upon it. The living entity can see only when the Lord sees. The living entity can smell when the Lord smells, and so on. The idea is that the living entity cannot do anything independently. He can simply think of doing something independently, but he cannot act independently. This independence in thinking is there by the grace of the Lord. But the thinking can be given shape by the grace of the Lord, and therefore the common saying is that man proposes and God disposes. The whole explanation is on the subject of the absolute dependence of the living entities and absolute independence of the Supreme Lord. Less intelligent persons claiming to be on an equal level with God must first prove themselves to be absolute and independent. And then they must substantiate their claim to being one with God. Om Gyana Timanandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksus Unmalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayamupakadamayam Dadati Sat Padantikam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakopa Tubhisja Kripasindu Bhevicha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo, Namo Namaha. Thereafter, when the Supreme Purusha desired to smell odors, the nostrils and respiration were generated. The nasal instrument and odors came into existence. And the controlling deity of air, carrying smell, also became manifest. So we see Krishna is creating all these different sense organs. And it reminds me of this painting of the universal form, so many faces, noses, eyes, ears, everything. They're all created by Krishna. So the main topic seems today is how Krishna is independent and self-sufficient. There's a Sanskrit word svarat, which means that he is independent. And also another word is aptakaman, that he fulfills his own desires. So how? By his own energies. And who are these energies, or what are these energies? They're actually all persons. They're personal, and they're all first-class servants of Krishna. And they fulfill his desires without him even having to ask them. They just somehow know what he wants, and he does it. So he's independent in this way. And because he's independent, sometimes he may be called anaptakama, which is just the opposite of aptakama. Instead of fulfilling his desires, this anaptakama, he's apparently unable to achieve his desires without the cooperation of his devotees. So just see he's the supreme independent Lord. And just like the prayer we say, I just said before class, Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam. This is Rupa Goswami's, the Sri Rupa Pranam. And what is that? Manobhistam. He knows the mind of the Lord. So this is the devotees. They completely know the mind of the Lord. And Lord Chaitanya had trained him up and instructed them, and therefore they wrote so many nice books, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the Hari Bhakti Vilas, Vidagdha Madhava, and there's so many books written by these pure devotees of Krishna and all these different devotees. And we have these literatures to get absorbed in so that we can become absorbed in Krishna. So therefore we take shelter of the devotees of Krishna. And because the devotees are such wonderful servants of Krishna, Krishna is also looking for opportunities, and his devotees are looking for opportunities to serve his devotees. Like we see here, he was just desiring to serve his brother, Sanatan, and Radharani came personally and wanted to serve his devotee. So it's so nice. So we see there's three basic energies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. His first energy, we kind of mentioned, is his transcendental energy. We see so much energies in the spiritual world, and they're all first-class servants of Krishna. So that's described there. And then one of his energies is the material energy, which is represented by Durga. And her duty is to give us a hard time. So we see that she's actually a very pure devotee of Krishna, and that's what she does. She trains us up to help us understand this is not our home. And we get different results. So she's teaching us to get in the reactions to our karma. And then the third energy is the marginal energy, which is ourselves, the jivas. We're forced to serve Krishna by these three modes of material nature. So we have the Adhyatmic, which is the soul, the perceiver. There's the Adhibodhic, which is the instruments of the senses that we're using. And then there's the Adhidaivik, They carry out the functions, for us to do these things. They're the controllers, the devas. They're, controlling. So this way the Supreme Lord is actually enjoying, and these are his senses. They're manifested of the desire of the Virat Rupa. And we tap into those senses. It's like if there's a river flowing, you could get water, you could tap into that water. But if there's no river or well, how can you tap into it? You can't get anything. So that's our only independence, is that we can desire. And we either desire in connection with the Lord or separately from the Lord. And we use these senses to fulfill his desire. Otherwise, there's problems. And we'll see. That's what Durga gives us, these problems. And we realize that we're not independent. We're not absolute. Because even though you may try and think you're independent or absolute, you get reactions. And whether they're good or bad reactions, they're all bad. But that's the difference between us and Krishna. Krishna is supreme. He can do anything he wants. And just like Prabhupada was given a punchline in the purport, for the less intelligent, you have to prove you're absolute and independent. They see you, prove it. But yet they don't show any symptoms to prove it. And as we said, they're not free from the reactions to their actions. So Krishna comes to the mature world, and he shows by his good example, in his activities, of how we should act, and according to, proper ways. But when it pleases him, he acts in any way he likes. And there's no reaction. Just like when Rukmini wanted him to accept her, he left the battle, which a Kshatriya never does. But Krishna, he could do whatever he wants. They could say he's like a Kshatriya, but that's something a Kshatriya would never do, is leave the battle. But he left the battle for his devotee because he's independent to do whatever he likes. And he reciprocates with his devotees like that, to fulfill their desire. And also, he showed his universal form to Arjuna. Now that's acting on the absolute platform. If you think you're absolutely independent, let's see your universal form. Nobody could do that but Krishna. And then we see example also when Banasura kidnapped those 16,000 princesses. They were considered untouchable. What to speak of unmarriable. But Krishna, being independent, he accepted them all. And he fulfilled their desire, and he married them all, and he gave each a palace. And he entered each and every one of those palaces at the same time. Not that he was a clone, but he was performing different activities in each palace. Who can do that? There's no yogi or even any demigod can, do this. That's Krishna's complete independence. So here we are in our virtual reality, and in that virtual reality, we're making even more virtual reality of what is really reality. It's actually all Krishna's energy. So this is all we're doing, is we're seeing things. You've heard of this word, vicariously. Is that this is how we're enjoying vicariously, and it's a way of experiencing or imagining that we're experiencing through the actions of another person. Just like sometimes people like to live vicariously through their children. They want to see their children do things that they weren't able to do, so they want to experience it through them. Or by reading a book, we get so absorbed into it that we have our emotions. We begin to experience that. Or we see people, just live in an imaginary world, thinking that they're such a miserable life that they try to live through someone else, whether it's a TV, a movie, or whatever. So as Prabhupada mentioned in the purport, man proposes, God disposes. And because we're proposing and God disposes, he does it so smoothly and perfectly that we think we're doing it. Just like you desire something and you move your hand. I'm moving my hand. I desire, but Krishna at the same time. I propose, God disposed. It's amazing. It's just, Krishna's ability like that. So there's some interesting topics where Srila Prabhupada talks about this term, man proposes and God disposes. And there's the pastime of Kardama Muni when he had a desire to get married. And he didn't go off on his own to fulfill that desire. He just depended on the Supreme Lord. And he got better desire. He got a better result than what he would have desired himself. And Prabhupada says there in the purport, thus it is said that if we pray to the Supreme Lord in every transaction of our material existence, everything will be done very nicely and just suitable to our heart's desire. In other words, in all circumstances, we must take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and depend completely on His decision. Man proposes, God disposes. The fulfillment of desires, therefore, should be entrusted to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the nicest solution. Kardama Muni desired only a wife, but because he was a devotee of the Lord selected a wife for him, who was the emperor's daughter, a princess. Thus Kardama Muni got a wife beyond his expectation. If we depend on the choice of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we will receive benedictions in greater opulence than we desire. So just giving us that we should use everything that we're using here, these senses, everything, to try to please the Lord and try to serve the Lord. And that way we'll get a much better result. There's a Bhagavad Gita lecture that Srila Prabhupada gave in London. And there's a guest, and during the questions and answers, and he asked Srila Prabhupada, is it possible for any living entity to do something until the Lord hears him? Prabhupada says, yes. God sanctions, but you desire. Man proposes, God disposes. Whatever you desire, if you insist, God will sanction. And without His sanction, you cannot do. Therefore, your doing something is dependent on God's sanction. But you desire something out of your own will. You are not a stone, you are a living entity. So you can desire anything. So Krishna consciousness, they do not do anything without Krishna's sanction. So see, we're learning how to desire. So that's Krishna consciousness, that we can't do anything unless the Lord desires it. And Krishna gives us these literatures, the Dharma Shastras, to show how to desire. And how to desire is how to please Him. So this is what we want to do, is our desire is to see how I can please the Lord, not myself, not my senses. In fact, they're not your senses here in the material world. So Prabhupada agrees, and he says, not God desires, God sanctions. Don't say it like that. Desire is yours, but sanction is God's. Just like you want to do some business, you must take sanction from the government. You take license. You cannot do out of your own will. Similarly, you can desire and propose. God, I want to do this, and God will sanction. And then he goes on to say how those who are not Krishna conscious, they always saying, I want this, I want this, I want that, And then Krishna says, all right, take this. But he says, really, he wants you to give up all this nonsense. But we don't want to do that. We don't want to surrender to Krishna. Krishna said, just simply surrender to me. Just take me. But we don't want to do that. So Krishna's still inquiring, please, just come. And then we see even Lord Chaitanya when he came, you could imagine Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda knocking at your door. And as soon as you open the door, they bow down to your feet and say, please chant Hare Krishna. Please chant Hare Krishna. So even when Krishna came, and Lord Chaitanya, actually when he came, even when he was a baby, he was crying, and then he wanted you to, when the devotees chanted Hare Krishna, he would stop crying. So just see, we want to please Krishna, help him stop crying, so we chant Hare Krishna. So this is our surrender to Krishna. So Krishna has given us the best thing, but we don't want to take it. You could do whatever you want, you know. So just like the father, you know, has a grown-up son and he says, you know, you could do like this and do like that, but you still have your independence. The son may think, oh, but I don't want to do that. I just want to do this. Okay, do whatever you like. So, but without the father's sanction, the son can't really do anything. So without Krishna's sanction, what can you do? But we get to propose, that's all. We can just propose. And therefore, man proposes, God disposes. So there's another lecture that Prabhupada gave during a Rath Yatra in 1975 in Philadelphia. And he says that how this mature body is just like a dress. And because we're attached to this mature world, we get different types of dresses or bodies. So he says this body is like a machine. And he quotes that verse from the Bhagavad Gita, Ishvara Sarva Bhutanam, that, you know, we're like a machine. So he says here, the living entity we desire, man proposes, God disposes. God is very kind. Whatever you desire, he will fulfill. Although he says that this kind of material desires, they won't satisfy you. But we want, therefore Krishna supplies us. Krishna, different types of bodies to fulfill our different desires. This is called conditional life. So this is how we have 8,400,000 different species of bodies to fulfill all these different desires. Krishna is so kind. He created this whole thing so that we can do that. So this nature gives us a chance. So now do what you want to do. You know, you got developed consciousness, so if you want to go back to the evolutionary process, then, or you want to go to the higher planets, or you want to go back to Krishna, you know, you can do whatever you like. The option's yours. So Prabhupada says, our movement is that. Why not stop this material conditioned life? Repetition of birth, death, old age, and disease. This is intelligence. Why should we remain in this material body and undergo repetition of change of body? Let us have our original spiritual body. That is wanted. That is intelligence. So there's another thing that reminded me, a saying that people say, and Prabhupada says is, borrowed plumes. Borrowed plumes. You've heard that before? You haven't? Yeah, it's like we're just borrowing things. I think it's like a bird was borrowing the peacock's feather and thinking it was a peacock, you know. But no, so Prabhupada uses that. There's a verse in the Bhagavatam which kind of, Prabhupada brought that up in the purport. And this is where Arjuna was saying, you know, I have that same Gandiva bow, I have the same arrows, I have the same chariot, the horses, everything. And, you know, I'm the same Arjuna. And kings were offering me respects, and I was very powerful, you know. And a moment notice, all this was null and void. So he was wonder why this happened to him. And then Prabhupada describes nicely in the purport there that, as we have discussed more than once, one should not be puffed up by borrowed plumes. All energies and powers are derived from the Supreme Source, Lord Krishna, and they act as long as he desires and cease to function as soon as he withdraws. All electrical energies are received from the powerhouse, and as soon as the powerhouse stops supplying energy, the bulbs are of no use. So in a moment's time, such energies can be generated or withdrawn by the supreme will of the Lord. Material civilization without the blessing of the Lord is child's play only. As long as the parents allow the child to play, it's all right. As soon as the parents withdraw, the child has to stop. Human civilization, all activities thereof, must be dovetailed with the supreme blessing of the Lord. And without his blessing, all advancement of human civilization is like decoration on a dead body. It is said here that dead civilization and its activities are something like clarified butter on ashes, the accumulation of money by a magic wand, and the sowing of seeds in a barren land. So that's an example of Arjuna there given us. And also, Lord Brahma was telling Narada Muni the same point, that he gave a whole list of all these great personalities from himself down to all these different powerful demigods, supermen, these sages, rishis. He was telling him all these things, they have extraordinary power, opulence, so many things. But he said that they may appear to be like such powerful supreme lords, but they're not. And every one of them only possesses a fragment of the great potencies of Krishna. So there's so many wonderful phenomenons that we see in the mature world, great powers, things. And people that are less intelligent, they worship these things. And they think that this is, worshipable, or they think it's like a god. Like the Aborigines will worship lightning or a mountain or something like that. But Prabhupada describes in the purport there that, so there's different persons, societies, and communities. Some worship the potent manifestations of the Lord, wrongly accepting the powerful object as God. But in this verse, it is advised by Brahmaji that none of them is the Supreme Lord. They're only borrowed plumes from the original Almighty Lord Sri Krishna. When the Lord advises in Bhagavad Gita to worship Him alone, it is to be understood that worshiping Lord Krishna includes worshiping all that is mentioned, because He is Lord Krishna, includes everyone. So that's Krishna. So people that are just attached to these potent manifestations, like the scientists that become enamored and amazed by things and they try to figure things out on their own. But they forget that these are coming from a person. These are personal energies of the Lord. I mean, it's a person behind all these energies. So this is the real vicarious enjoyment, is that you assist somebody. You want to assist someone like Mother Yasoda, or a great devotee like Srila Prabhupada, because you want to expand the pleasure of Krishna, or his servants. So that's the reality. Is Krishna, his devotees, and his pastimes. And we're attached to all the facilities because they make it nicer for Krishna. But the facilities aren't the focus. It's not that we become attached to the facilities, but we just use them. We're not enamored by them, like the scientists are enamored by all these facilities. So this is what we're trying to do, is convert the material energy into the spiritual energy. And this is what the universal form, the energy of the universal form, with all these senses and all these abilities that we see and have, we want to engage them under the control of Yogamaya, not Mahamaya. So this is so important. And here's the gopis. This is the epitome of becoming someone, living like someone else. And they're pretending or imitating Krishna's pastimes. So this is a real reality, is that you associate with devotees, with Krishna, with his pastimes, you glorify them, you read about him and serve him. In this way, the heart gets purified. And this is the most powerful association. So association, what does it mean? It means sound vibration. We're hearing about Krishna, we're somehow or another reading about him, that's hearing, we're serving him in that way. Because there's a channel between the heart and the ear. So what we hear goes to the heart. Like, you hear, like the Bhakti Shaktis, you hear about devotional service from the devotees, you get this Bhakti Shakti. And you want to engage in devotional service, and that what we hear goes to the heart, and we become transformed in that way. Or you could hear from the Vikarma Shaktis, the materialists, and then we'll have the desire in the heart for sinful activities, for material activities. And we see that's what's happening today. People are hearing through social media in so many different ways, and they're forcing people to act in certain ways because they're hearing the heart is becoming contaminated and it's hard, and they act in such a way to cause harm. So this is what's happening. So there's a nice verse that talks about this association, this channel between the ear and the heart. It's in the, I don't know if I put the reference down here. I think it's in the second canto. And that's the Bhavanti Hrit Karna Rasayana Kata. That's the verse starts, Satatam Prasagnam Mama Virya Samvido. Yeah, third canto. And so that's a Bhavanti, become Hrit, the heart, Karna, the ear, to the ear, Rasayana, pleasing, Kata, the stories. So that's the association of pure devotees. Discussion of the pastimes and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and the heart. And by cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation. And thereafter he is freed and his attraction becomes fixed. Then real devotion and devotional service begins. So this is the process of advancing in Krishna consciousness. And the first point is that we must seek association of persons who are Krishna conscious and engage in devotional service. It's not that we could just theoretically try to read or understand, but we have to be engaged and seek association of devotees. And then we'll be able to understand Krishna. And then I'll just end here with Srila Prabhupada says that, let's see, that one will develop faith by, reading and in association of devotees, then we can understand Srimad Bhagavatam. And that's how we understand the personal activities of Krishna. And then he says we develop this faith of the Supreme Lord, then we become fixed, and then our attraction for the association of the Lord increases. So here he says association with devotees means association with the Lord. The devotee who makes this association develops the consciousness for rendering service to the Lord. And then, being situated in the transcendental position of devotional service, he gradually becomes perfect. So that's the point there that we see. If we really want our independence, then we have to actually serve Krishna, who is the Supreme Independent. And then we will actually experience a loving relationship with the Supreme, with our spiritual forms, our spiritual bodies. And there we'll have experiences that we can't even imagine. That's such paltry experiences in the material world who cannot compare. But we'll use these instruments that we have now, which is actually Krishna's, they're borrowed plumes, to actually serve him and therefore get purified. And then ultimately go back to him. So I'd like to end there and open up for any questions from Brigupati Prabhu. Yes. Vicarious, yeah.
Just recently, I visited a dentist office, and it was in the waiting room. There's a big screen like that, and they were showing a movie. So I sat down. I figured, had to wait for a while, and I'm not going to watch that nonsense. I was trying to chant or read or something. Couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Couldn't do it. I had to go outside. And then like an hour later, I was waiting. I had to wait for somebody. Anyway, so same thing. I came back in and they were showing another movie. I had to go outside to avoid getting absorbed into that vicarious enjoyment. And the whole world, all this electronic stuff, people watching videos or sports games. Throughout my whole life, vicarious enjoyment is kind of like what people are sucked into. And it's what, as you pointed out, that's what we're doing here in the material world. The soul is just vicariously enjoying. It's in a virtual reality, attempting to vicariously enjoy some fictitious character, which we're not. But when you use that in spiritual life, when you engage that vicarious enjoyment and, like, say, thinking of Krishna's pastimes, hearing about Krishna's pastimes, and you're quote-unquote fantasizing about participating in those pastimes, does that evolve into real enjoyment? Is that how it works? That you meditate on these pastimes, and then eventually you enter into these pastimes, and your enjoyment is more than vicarious. It's a direct experience, a real experience.
Exactly. That's exactly what you're saying, yes. You got it right. Yeah, that's the point that Srila Prabhupada is trying to make, is that we want to associate with reality, which is Krishna. Everything is Krishna. But here we have, Krishna's created this whole manifestation just to fulfill those separate desires, to enjoy separately from Krishna. But you really can't. But Krishna makes an arrangement to create a virtual reality, to think you're doing it. So we want to go back to the reality. And Krishna comes to reveal through his devotees, his pure devotees, like Rupa Goswami, to write all these books so that we can actually get absorbed into that vicarious, idea.
It starts off just us hearing the pastimes, meditating on the pastimes, and as our conscience becomes purified, we'll actually enter into those and directly experience those pastimes as opposed to just fantasizing.
They were, like Prabhupada said, I didn't write these books. Krishna came personally and dictated them to me. And then he also says, Krishna is within these books. Narada Muni is in these books. All these, they're there. It's a personality. The book is non-different than Krishna. This is Krishna's absolute independent nature, which is amazing. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you,
Prabhu.
You were mentioning about the living entity desiring and Krishna sanctioning.
Yes, man proposes.
But not everything that we desire, Krishna can sanction. So sometimes there are events that happen that bewilders people, in the dealings with Krishna, like this horrible thing that happened to some people in Bangladesh. Somebody will think, well, the devotees were not desiring this, obviously, but other people were desiring this. And then the Lord sanctioned the desire of these criminals, you can say. So what is the teaching there for the devotees or for the world in that sanctioning? Can you elaborate?
We have so many examples in the Bhagavatam. We see Prahlad Maharaj. He was tortured and was tried to kill by his own father. But yet, what did he do? He prayed for his father. There's one devotee said what he likes to do is he wants to see who his greatest enemy is, someone who hates him or someone that doesn't like him. And he would pray for that person and chant japa for that person. And he said that, you'd be amazed how much advancement you could make by doing that. So we could see, as I mentioned, there's the Bhakti Shakti and then there's the Vikarma Shakti. You see, whoever you associate or you hear from, that goes to the heart. So we have very low-class devotees or low-class people from low-class religions, so-called religions. They hear things from these Vikarma Shakti, they hear that materialist sound vibrations. And whether they're doing it through social media, this is what they had, Facebook, that's how they organized this thing in Bangladesh. Where they get these thousands of people come and they're all hearing this Vikarma Shakti energy through Facebook. And because their hearts are impure, it causes them to do that. But the devotees, they don't want to get on the same level and then violence with violence. But they can pray for them and they could, what the devotees want is justice. The authorities should bring justice and also actually get protection. But Krishna protects devotees, and sometimes we're tested to see where we're really at. Until we're really put through the fire of ordeal, then your real qualities will come out. And we don't know. Krishna's in control with what this happens. To try to figure out things, we go crazy. It's very complicated. But we're in Kali Yuga. This is a prison house, and what happens in prison? There's violence, there's so many things. So we do what we can while we can, with what we have. And just depend on Krishna. Yes,
Archita Prabhu is organizing a Harinam.
Yeah, I made a
Friday.
poster for him, that we're, against this, trying to destroy religious freedom. And this is what they're doing. Because the demons, that's always a battle between the demons and the devotees. Brigupati has something to say. Yeah, go ahead.
This point about how to understand all this, So, there's that section in the Bhagavatam where Bhishma, the Pandavas come to see Bhishma as he's about to pass away.
Yeah, that's
and Maharaj Yudhishthira is really upset about what happened in the Battle of Kurukshetra. So many people got killed. He feels like somewhat personally responsible. He's feeling very guilty. So Bhishma is trying to, and he's feeling very sinful. He's thinking like it must have been due to my past sinful activities that this is some sort of reaction or whatever. So Bhishma is trying to discourage him from thinking like that. And then one of the purports, Prabhupada says this, and I think it's relevant. I think it's kind of, apropos. So Prabhupada says, Bhishma wanted to impress upon Maharaj Yudhishthira that since time immemorial, no one, including such demigods as Shiva and Brahma, could ascertain the real plan of the Lord. So what can we understand about it? It is useless also to inquire about it. Even exhaustive philosophical inquiries of sages cannot ascertain the plan of the Lord. The best policy is simply to abide by the orders of the Lord without argument. The sufferings of the Pandavas were never due to their past deeds. The Lord had to execute the plan of establishing the kingdom of virtue, and therefore his own devotees suffered temporarily in order to establish the conquest of virtue. And it goes on. In other words, Krishna's got some big plan.
Yeah.
We just, it's like, it seems like to me Prabhupada's saying, don't try to understand it. You're not going to be able to understand it. Krishna's got some big plan, and ultimately it's for the ultimate benefit of everyone, particularly the devotees and other living entities as well. But you're not going to be able to understand it. Just so what we got to do is just simply abide by the orders of the Lord without argument, and just hang in there. If we're fortunate enough to still be around, we'll see that Krishna knew what he was doing. But it's a tough one.
That's perfect. Perfect. Beautiful. What's the verse number? 19:16. Yeah. That's great. Perfect. Thank you. Any other comments, questions, realizations? Thank you for your kind attention. All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.